The stars had never looked so crowded. Admiral Kethvorin stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and watched his armada take position round the small yellow sun. 12,000 warships moved with perfect precision, each vessel finding its assigned place in the formation. That had brought terror to 800 worlds before this one. The hegemony of 12 suns had spent 10,000 years building the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. They had conquered species that breathed fire. They had crushed civilizations that lived in the hearts of stars. They had broken the will of creatures so ancient that they remembered the birth of black holes. And now they had come for Earth. Kethvorin allowed himself a small smile. His fur eyes reflected the distant blue dot that was his target, and he felt the familiar thrill of impending victory. The humans were nothing special. They were soft creatures made of water and carbon, barely capable of traveling faster than light. Their ships were primitive. Their weapons were laughable. They had no empire, no unity, no central command. This would be easy. High Admiral, his second-in-command, said, approaching with a data tablet. The fleet is in position. All weapons are charged. The Conquest broadcast is ready. Kethvorin nodded slowly. The Conquest broadcast was a tradition as old as the hegemony itself. Every species received the same message, the same terms, the same choice. Surrender or die. In 10,000 years, every species had eventually chosen surrender. Some took minutes. Some took hours, but they all knelt in the end. Send it, Kethvorin said. The broadcast went out across all frequencies, in every language the humans used. The message was simple and clear. The hegemony of 12 suns claimed this system and all its inhabitants as property. The humans had 6 standard hours to surrender unconditionally. If they refused, every city on Earth would burn. Every ship would be destroyed. Every human who resisted would die. There would be no negotiation. There would be no mercy. There would only be submission or extinction. Kethvorin walked to his command chair and sat down. Around him, his officers monitored their stations with practiced efficiency. The weapons officers kept the planet killers ready. The communications officers listened for the expected response of panic and begging. The tactical officers watched their screens for any sign of human military activity. The first hour passed in silence. Kethvorin was not concerned. This was normal. The initial shock of facing 12,000 warships often left species unable to respond. They were probably arguing among themselves, blaming each other, trying to understand how their world had ended so suddenly. He had seen it countless times before. Any response? He asked. Nothing, High Admiral. All human communication channels are active, but they are not broadcasting to us. They are talking among themselves, Kethvorin said, trying to decide who will deliver their surrender. Give them time. The second hour passed, then the third. Kethvorin began to feel the first hint of irritation. Most species surrendered within the first 2 hours. The longest had been the Crystalline Collective, who had held out for hours before their leaders finally accepted the inevitable. But even they had been communicating throughout, sending desperate pleas for mercy that the hegemony had ignored. The humans sent nothing. High Admiral, the science officer said, her voice carrying a note of confusion. I am detecting unusual energy readings from several locations in the system. Explain. There appear to be power signatures from the human moon, also from the 4th planet, and from multiple locations in the asteroid belt. She studied her readings more closely. This is strange. Our intelligence indicated that humans had minimal infrastructure beyond their home world. Kethvorin waved a dismissive hand. Mining operations, resource extraction. They are a young species still learning to use their system. It is nothing. The energy signatures are quite large, High Admiral. Compared to what? Human technology is primitive. Their largest power plants would barely light one of our ship's corridors. Continue monitoring, but do not be alarmed. The 4th hour came, and with it, the first crack in Kethvorin's confidence. Something was wrong. Every species responded to the Conquest broadcast. Every single one. Even the most stubborn, the most proud, the most foolish species at least acknowledged the message. They cursed. They threatened. They begged. They bargained. But they always responded. The humans had not said a single word. Open a direct channel to their largest population center, Kethvorin ordered. Perhaps they did not understand the broadcast. The channel opened. A human voice answered almost immediately. "We received your message," the voice said. It was calm, almost pleasant, as if discussing the weather rather than the extinction of a species. "We understand your terms. We are currently preparing our response. Your response should be surrender," Keth Voren said. "There is no other acceptable answer." "We understand," the voice said. "Our response will arrive before your deadline. Please stand by." The channel closed. Keth Voren stared at the blank screen for a long moment. In 10,000 years, no species had ever told the hegemony to stand by. The casual dismissal of his ultimatum was almost insulting. These creatures truly did not understand what they were facing. "Hi, Admiral," the science officer said again. "The energy readings are increasing. Significantly. From where?" "From everywhere." She turned to face him, and he saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before in one of his officers. He saw fear. The moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, the gas giants and their moons, even from deep space beyond the outer planets. "I am detecting power signatures that dwarf anything in our records. That is impossible. Human technology cannot produce such readings. The readings are real, High Admiral, and they are still growing." Keth Voren stood and walked to the main display. The tactical map showed his fleet surrounding Earth, 12,000 points of light arranged in perfect formation. But now the map was showing something else. New signatures were appearing across the solar system, dozens of them, then hundreds, each one pulsing with energy that his sensors could barely measure. "What is this?" he whispered. "Unknown, High Admiral. But whatever they are powering up." The fifth hour began, and Keth Voren made his decision. "All ships, prepare for immediate attack," he ordered. "We will not wait for their deadline. We strike now. High Admiral, our orders require us to honor the surrender period. Our orders assume the enemy is behaving rationally. Something is wrong here. I want the planet killers charged and ready to fire in 10 minutes. We will reduce their world to ash and then deal with whatever these energy signatures represent." His officers moved to obey. Across the fleet, weapons systems hummed to life. The planet killers, massive cannons capable of shattering continents, began their firing sequence. In 10 minutes, Earth would burn. 5 minutes passed. The communications officer suddenly sat up straight. "High Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from Earth. Put it through." The main screen flickered to life. A human female appeared, dressed in simple clothing, sitting behind a plain desk. She looked directly at the camera with eyes that held no fear, no desperation, no pleading. She looked like someone who was about to deliver a prepared statement to a press conference. "This message is for the hegemony of 12 suns," she said. "We acknowledge your ultimatum. We reject your terms. We will not surrender. We will not submit. We will not kneel." Keth Voren leaned forward. "You do not understand your situation. Look at the sky. Look at our fleet. You cannot win this fight." The woman smiled. It was not a desperate smile or a brave smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something he did not. "We have spent 50 years in your galaxy," she said. 50 years learning, 50 years watching, 50 years preparing. You think we are children because we kept our heads down. You think we are weak because we did not build an empire. You think we are primitive because we let you believe we were primitive." She leaned forward slightly. "You gave us 6 hours to fall. We will need less than 1 minute to end this. Our response is about to arrive, Admiral. We suggest your crews prepare for what comes next." The transmission ended. Keth Voren opened his mouth to give the order to fire, to silence these arrogant creatures before they could do whatever they were planning. He never got the chance. Across the solar system, from every moon and asteroid and hidden platform that humanity had built in secret, the weapons went live. And in that moment, Keth Voren understood that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity stopped pretending. 50 years earlier, humanity had taken its first steps into the galaxy. The breakthrough drive, they called it, a desperate invention born from a dying Earth. A last hope created by scientists who knew their species needed to find new resources or face extinction. When the first human ship crossed the boundary of their solar system and discovered the galaxy was full of life, There was celebration on every continent. Humanity was not alone. The universe was vast and inhabited and waiting to be explored. Then they met the hegemony, and the celebration stopped. Ambassador Chen Wei remembered the first contact with perfect clarity. She had been young then, barely 30 years old, assigned to the diplomatic mission because she spoke 12 languages and had a talent for understanding alien minds. The Vexari delegation had arrived on a ship the size of a city, and they had looked at humanity's tiny vessel the way a giant might look at an ant. The terms they offered were simple. Humanity could exist. They could trade. They could travel within carefully defined borders. But they would never be equals. They would never be members of the hegemony. They would always be a minor species tolerated but not respected, allowed to live only because they were too small to threaten anyone. Most humans accepted these terms. What choice did they have? The hegemony had 10,000 years of conquest behind them. They had weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. They had fleets that could darken the skies of any world they chose. Humanity was a newborn, taking its first steps into a room full of giants. But Ambassador Chen had seen something else. In her meetings with hegemony officials, in her careful study of their history and culture, she had seen the cracks. She had seen how the hegemony dealt with species that threatened them. She had seen the graves of civilizations that had stood up to the empire and been erased. And she had realized a terrible truth. The hegemony would never allow humanity to grow strong. Sooner or later, they would decide that humans were a threat. Sooner or later, the armadas would come. And on that day, humanity would need to be ready. She brought her concerns to the United Earth Council in secret. She showed them the records she had gathered. She explained what she had learned about hegemony weapons, hegemony tactics, hegemony weaknesses, and she proposed something that had never been attempted in human history. They would prepare for war while pretending to prepare for peace. For 50 years, humanity had played its role perfectly. On the surface, they were exactly what the hegemony expected. A scattered species, divided by old conflicts, struggling to adapt to galactic technology. Their ships were slow and poorly armed. Their colonies were small and vulnerable. Their military was fragmented and weak. But beneath the surface, humanity was building. The first secret facilities went up on the dark side of the moon, hidden from any observation. They were small at first, just research laboratories studying captured hegemony technology. Then came the factories, buried deep in the lunar rock, producing weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Then came the training grounds, where human soldiers learned to fight enemies they hoped they would never face. Mars was next. The red planet became a fortress disguised as a struggling colony. The domes on the surface housed farmers and miners who complained about harsh conditions and failed harvests. The bases below the surface housed weapons that could punch through hegemony shields like paper. The asteroid belt became a network of hidden platforms, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a dozen warships. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn became listening posts and weapon stations. Even the distant reaches of the outer system held secrets, installations so far from Earth that no one would think to look for them. And through it all, humanity kept pretending. They built their public ships with visible flaws and obvious weaknesses. They let their political leaders argue on public channels about things that did not matter. They created the image of a species that could barely agree on what to have for dinner, much less mount a coordinated defense against an invading fleet. The hegemony watched and saw exactly what humanity wanted them to see. Now, as Admiral Kethvorin S. Armada surrounded Earth, the truth was about to be revealed. Deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, the unified command center hummed with activity. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat at their stations, their old rivalries forgotten in the face of the greater threat. Ambassador Chen, now old and gray but still sharp as ever, watched the main display with quiet satisfaction. All systems report ready, the operations officer announced. The Castellan Protocol is active. The Castellan Protocol. 50 years of work distilled into a single battle plan. Every weapon, every ship, every soldier knew exactly what to do when the order came. There would be no confusion, no delay, no hesitation. When humanity struck, it would strike with the force of a species that had spent half a century preparing for this single moment. "The Admiral has ordered his fleet to attack," the intelligence officer reported. "They are charging their planet killers." Chen nodded slowly. "Time to firing? 8 minutes. More than enough. Are our people ready?" "All stations report weapons locked. Targeting solutions confirmed. We can fire on your command." Chen looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, scientists and strategists. They had all set aside their differences for this moment. They had all worked together in secret for decades. And now they would find out if their preparations had been enough. "We knew this day would come," she said quietly. "We hoped it would not be in our lifetime, but we knew it would come. The hegemony does not tolerate potential threats. They would have found a reason to attack us eventually, whether we provoked them or not." She turned back to the display, where 12,000 enemy ships waited to destroy her world. "They think they know what we are. They think we are primitive, divided, weak. They think this will be an easy conquest, another minor species brought to heel by the might of their empire." Her voice hardened. "They are wrong." She pressed the command button. Across the solar system, the weapons went active. On the moon, massive doors opened in the gray dust, revealing cannons that had taken 30 years to build. On Mars, what looked like mining equipment unfolded into missile batteries holding 10,000 warheads. Each, in the asteroid belt, platforms that had drifted silently for decades suddenly blazed with power. Around the gas giants, satellites that had posed as research stations revealed their true purpose. Humanity had built an empire's worth of weapons while pretending to be farmers and merchants. They had hidden their strength so well that not even the hegemony's spies had suspected. And now all of it, every cannon and missile and beam weapon that human science could create, aimed at the invading fleet. In the command center, the weapons officer looked at Chen with steady eyes. "All systems locked. 12,000 targets confirmed. Firing solutions optimal." Chen took a deep breath. This was the moment. 50 years of preparation, decades of sacrifice, generations of humans who had worked in secret knowing they might never see the results of their labor. It all came down to this. She thought of her grandchildren, asleep in their beds half a world away. She thought of all the children on Earth who did not know that their future was being decided in this room, in this moment. She thought of the humans who would be born after this day, who would grow up in a galaxy where humanity was no longer prey. "For Earth," she said softly. "For all of us," she gave the order. "Weapons free." The display lit up with targeting data as every hidden weapon in the solar system prepared to fire. In orbit above Earth, the hegemony fleet continued their attack preparations, unaware that their doom was already written. They had given humanity 6 hours to fall. They would not survive the next 12 seconds. The first second was fire. From every hidden platform, every secret base, every weapon humanity had built in 50 years of careful preparation. Beams of light and waves of missiles and things the galaxy had never seen. Before raced toward the hegemony fleet. The darkness of space lit up like a new sun being born. Energy readings that the Vexari sensors could not even measure flooded the system with power. Admiral Keth Voran had exactly 1 second to understand what was happening before his world ended. He saw the weapons fire on his tactical display. He saw the impossible numbers streaming across his screens. He saw the targeting locks that covered his entire fleet like a blanket of death. And in that single frozen moment, he realized that everything he believed about humans was a lie. They were not primitive. They were not weak. They were not divided. They had been waiting. The second was shields failing. Hegemony shields were the strongest in the galaxy. They had stopped weapons from species 1,000 years more advanced than humanity. They had survived attacks that should have shattered planets. No enemy had ever broken through hegemony shields without a sustained bombardment lasting hours or days. Human weapons went through them like they were not there. Keth Voran watched in horror as his flagship's defensive readings dropped from full power to 0. In less than a heartbeat, the shields did not fail gradually. They did not flicker or struggle or fight back. They simply vanished, overwhelmed by frequencies and energies that they were never designed to handle. Across the fleet, 11,999 other ships experienced the same impossible failure. The third second was chaos. Without shields, hegemony ships were just metal and machinery floating in the void. They were tough, built to survive the rigors of interstellar travel, but they were not invincible. Human weapons, designed specifically to exploit hegemony weaknesses, tore through hull plating like claws through paper. Explosions bloomed across the formation. Ships that had conquered worlds died in silence, their crews never knowing what hit them. The perfect formation that had been arranged to intimidate became a trap, each ship blocking the escape of its neighbors, each vessel a target that could not move away from the destruction. Keth Voren gripped his command chair as his flagship shuddered under impacts. Warning lights filled his bridge with red emergency lighting. Officers screamed reports that made no sense, damage assessments that could not be real, casualties that multiplied faster than anyone could count. The fourth second was realization. The humans had not just prepared weapons, they had prepared those weapons specifically for this battle. Every beam was tuned to frequencies that hegemony shields could not block. Every missile carried warheads designed to penetrate hegemony armor. Every attack followed patterns that exploited weaknesses in hegemony formations that the hegemony itself did not know existed. 50 years of study, 50 years of analysis, 50 years of learning exactly how to kill the empire that threatened them. The humans had been ready for this day since before Keth Voren was born. The fifth second was annihilation. Half the fleet died in that single second. 6,000 ships, crewed by millions of soldiers, ceased to exist. They did not surrender. They did not retreat. They simply ended, transformed from weapons of war into expanding clouds of debris and frozen bodies. The tactical display on Keth Voren's bridge showed the casualties in real time. Red icons multiplied like a plague, spreading across the formation as ship after ship went dark. The neat lines of the armada dissolved into chaos as survivors tried to maneuver away from the destruction, only to find that there was nowhere to go. The sixth second was silence. For one brief moment, the weapons stopped. The space around Earth was filled with wreckage and fire. The remains of the greatest armada the hegemony had ever assembled, but no new attacks came. Keth Voren dared to hope that the humans had exhausted their ammunition, that the remaining ships might survive, that there might still be a chance. Then the second wave hit. The seventh second was despair. The humans had not run out of weapons. They had simply been reloading. The second barrage was even more devastating than the first. It targeted the ships that had survived the initial attack, picking them off with precision that seemed almost personal. Each surviving vessel became the focus of multiple weapons platforms, their destruction guaranteed by overlapping fields of fire that left no possibility of escape. Keth Voren watched 3 of his escort ships die in the time it took him to blink. He felt his flagship shudder again as more impacts struck the hull. He heard the distant thunder of compartments breaching, atmosphere escaping, crew members dying. The 8th second was the death of pride. The hegemony had never lost a battle. In 10,000 years of conquest, no species had ever defeated their fleets in open combat. They had built their entire civilization on the foundation of their military supremacy. They were the masters of the galaxy, the rulers of stars, the conquerors of worlds, and they were dying like insects beneath a boot. Keth Voren saw his tactical officer killed when a beam punched through the bridge wall. He saw his communications equipment explode in a shower of sparks. He felt the artificial gravity flicker and fail, leaving him floating in the chaos of his destroyed command center. The 9th second was acceptance. There was no surviving this. There was no victory, no escape, no hope. The humans had planned this moment for 50 years, and they had planned it perfectly. Every weakness exploited, every strength negated, every assumption turned into a death sentence. Keth Voren had commanded the armada that was supposed to conquer Earth. He would die here, in the ruins of his flagship, surrounded by the debris of his fleet. He would become a footnote in history, the admiral who led the greatest military force ever assembled into the worst defeat the hegemony had ever suffered. The 10th second was fire again. More weapons hit what remained of the fleet. The number of surviving ships dropped below 1,000, then below 500. The debris field grew thicker, a ring of destruction spreading around Earth like a grotesque monument to hegemony arrogance. The 11th second was something unexpected. Keth Voren felt his flagship shudder one more time, but the impact was different. Not the hammer blow of a weapon, but something gentler, something deliberate. Through the shattered windows of his bridge, he saw a human ship approaching. It was small, barely larger than a shuttle, and it was not firing. It moved through the wreckage with careful precision, avoiding debris, approaching his crippled vessel like a rescue craft approaching a sinking boat. The 12th second was mercy. The weapons stopped, not all at once, but in a rolling wave of silence that spread across the battlefield. The hidden platforms stopped firing. The missile batteries went quiet. The beam weapons powered down. In 12 seconds, humanity had destroyed 11,847 warships of the hegemony of 12 suns. They stopped at 153. Kethvorin floated in the ruins of his bridge, breathing recycled air that would run out in minutes. Watching the human ship dock with his flagship, he did not understand. The humans could have killed them all. They could have finished the destruction, left no survivors, erased the armada completely. Instead, they had chosen to leave witnesses. The airlock opened and human soldiers entered the bridge. They wore combat armor and carried weapons, but they did not fire. They moved through the wreckage with careful efficiency, checking bodies, securing the area, searching for survivors. One of them approached Kethvorin and removed her helmet. She was young, with dark hair and darker eyes, and she looked at him with an expression he could not read. "Admiral Kethvorin," she said, "my name is Captain Lisa Chen. You are now a prisoner of the United Earth Defense Force." Kethvorin stared at her. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why did you stop? You could have killed us all." Captain Chen looked around at the destroyed bridge, at the bodies of hegemony officers, at the wreckage of an empire's pride. "Yes," she said quietly, "we could have. But killing is easy. Living with what comes after is hard. We will not become the monsters we fought against." She reached out and took his arm, guiding him toward the airlock. "Your war is over, Admiral. Now we decide what comes next." The hospital ship Mercy of Earth moved through the debris field like a ghost through a graveyard. Admiral Kethvorin stood at a window in the medical bay, watching the wreckage of his fleet drift past. Pieces of ships he had commanded, fragments of vessels he had known by name, the scattered remains of millions of soldiers who had followed him into what they thought would be an easy conquest. It was all dust now, metal and memory floating in the void. His wounds had been treated by human doctors. His broken arm had been set. The burns on his face had been cleaned and bandaged. They had been gentle with him, almost kind, and he did not understand why. The door opened behind him, and Captain Chen entered. She had changed out of her combat armor into a simple uniform, and she carried a data tablet in her hands. "Admiral," she said, "how are you feeling?" Confused, Kethvorin admitted, "You destroyed my fleet in 12 seconds. You could have killed me. You could have killed all of us. Instead, you are healing our wounds and asking how we feel." Chen walked to stand beside him at the window. For a long moment, she did not speak. She just watched the debris field with him, sharing the silence. "We had 50 years to prepare for this day," she finally said. 50 years to think about what kind of species we wanted to be. We could have built weapons and nothing else. We could have planned to kill every hegemony soldier and burn every hegemony world. Some people argued for that approach. Why didn't you? Because that would make us no different from you. Chen turned to look at him directly. The hegemony conquers. It destroys. It rules through fear. If we had become conquerors and destroyers, we would have just replaced one empire with another. The names would change, but the suffering would continue. Kethvorin was quiet for a moment. "So what do you want? If not conquest, then what?" "We want to be left alone. We want our world, our system, our space. We want to trade with species that want to trade with us. We want to help species that ask for our help. We do not want to rule anyone. We do not want to own anyone. We just want to exist. The hegemony will never accept that. The High Council will send more fleets. They will never stop until Earth is destroyed or conquered." Chen smiled, and there was sadness in it. "We know. That is why we are sending you home." Kethvorin stared at her. "Home? You are releasing us?" 153 ships survived the battle. We have repaired their engines and life support. We have treated their wounded. We have given them supplies for the journey back to hegemony space. She handed him the data tablet. And we have given them this. Keth Voren looked at the tablet. It contained complete recordings of the battle. Every angle, every moment, every destroyed ship documented in perfect detail. 12 seconds of annihilation preserved for anyone who wanted to watch. You want the High Council to see this, he said slowly. Yes, you want them to know what you can do. Yes, you want them to be afraid. Chen shook her head. No, Admiral. We want them to understand. Fear fades. Understanding lasts. We want your leaders to look at these recordings and realize that attacking Earth is not a path to victory. It is a path to extinction. She took back the tablet and opened another file. This one contained a single document, written in the flowing script of the hegemony's formal language. This is our offer, she said. Peace, not surrender, not submission, not a treaty that makes us lesser. Real peace, between equals. The hegemony leaves us alone, and we leave the hegemony alone. No more threats, no more fleets, no more ultimatums. Keth Voren read the document carefully. It was exactly what she had described. Simple terms, clearly stated, with no hidden demands or secret clauses. The humans were offering the hegemony something that had never been offered before. A chance to walk away. And if the High Council refuses, he asked, if they send another armada, larger than the first, then we will destroy that one too, Chen said simply. And the one after that, and the one after that. We will keep destroying your fleets until there are no more fleets to send. But we will not attack your worlds. We will not invade your space. We will not become what you are. She moved toward the door, then paused. There is something else in that document, Admiral. A secondary offer that we want you to deliver personally. What offer? The hegemony has conquered 847 species. Some of them have been under your rule for thousands of years. We are offering them all the same thing we want for ourselves, freedom. Any species that wishes to leave the hegemony will have our support. Any species that is threatened for trying to leave will have our protection. Keth Voren felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was not just a peace offer. This was a declaration that could tear the hegemony apart. The High Council will never accept this, he said. They would rather burn their own worlds than let conquered species go free. Then they will burn. Chen said quietly, and the species they hold in chains will finally be free. Either way, the era of hegemony conquest is over. The galaxy is about to change, Admiral. The only question is how much suffering comes before the change is complete. She opened the door. Your ships will depart in 6 hours. Your crews are being treated aboard the medical vessels. I suggest you speak with them before you leave. Let them know that they survived because we chose to let them survive. Let them carry that truth home with the recordings. Why do you care what they think? Chen stopped in the doorway and looked back at him. Because they are soldiers, like our soldiers. They followed orders, fought when they were told to fight, died when the battle turned against them. They are not responsible for the decisions of your High Council. They are just people who were sent to do a job. She gestured toward the window, toward the debris field that had once been a fleet. 11,847 ships were destroyed today. Millions of your people died. We grieve for them, Admiral, not because they were our enemies, but because they were living beings who did not deserve to die. Their deaths were necessary, but that does not make them right. We will carry the weight of this day for the rest of our existence. Keth Voren did not know what to say. In 10,000 years of hegemony history, he had never heard of a species that grieved for the enemies it had killed. Conquest was victory. Enemies were resources to be claimed or obstacles to be removed. The idea that humans would feel sorrow for hegemony deaths was completely foreign to him. You are strange creatures, he finally said. Chen laughed softly, a sound that held no malice. We know, we are very strange creatures indeed. Perhaps that is why we survived today. She left, and Keth Voren was alone with his thoughts and the endless debris field drifting past his window. He thought about the High Council. He thought about the 847 species living under hegemony rule. He thought about the power humanity had demonstrated today and the restraint they had shown in not using all of it. He thought about what it meant to be powerful enough to destroy an empire and to choose not to. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Keth Voren began to question everything he had been taught about strength and weakness, about conquest and peace, about what it truly meant to win. In 6 hours, he would begin the long journey home. He would stand before the High Council and deliver humanity's message. He would show them the recordings of their fleet's destruction. He would present their offer of peace, and he would tell them, in his own words, that humans were not the weak species the hegemony believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous. They were a species that chose mercy when destruction was easier. 6 months passed. The galaxy changed. Admiral Keth Voren stood before the High Council of the hegemony for the 5th time since his return. The chamber was smaller now, emptier. 3 of the original 12 council seats were vacant. Their occupants had been removed by their own people, overthrown by populations that no longer feared the hegemony's military might. The recordings from Earth had spread across the empire like a plague. Every conquered species had seen them. Every subject world knew what the humans had done to the mightiest armada ever assembled. 12 seconds. That was all it had taken. 12 seconds to shatter 10,000 years of military supremacy. And the humans had chosen to stop. That was the detail that no one could forget. The humans could have killed every ship, every soldier, every survivor. They could have erased the armada completely, left no witnesses, created a mystery that the hegemony would never solve. Instead, they had healed the wounded, repaired the ships, and sent the survivors home with a message. We can destroy you. We choose not to. For species that had lived under hegemony rule for centuries, the message was revolutionary. The empire's power had always seemed absolute. Resistance had always seemed futile. But now there was proof that the hegemony could be defeated. Now there was a species offering protection to anyone brave enough to seek freedom. The first rebellions started within weeks of Keth Voren's return. The Thornalley Collective has declared independence, the Council's military advisor reported. His voice was tired, worn down by months of constant crisis. Their fleet has moved to block the trade routes through their territory. They are requesting formal alliance with Earth. Crush them, Council leader Vexaner growled. Send the Second Armada. Remind them what happens to species that defy us. The Second Armada refuses to deploy. The advisor said quietly, their commanders have reviewed the Earth recordings. They do not believe they can win a direct engagement with human forces. Vexaner slammed his fist on the council table. Then execute the commanders and find officers who will obey. We have executed 17 senior commanders in the past month, council leader. The replacements are no more willing to face the humans than their predecessors. Keth Voren watched the exchange in silence. He had seen this argument play out many times since his return. The council leader demanded military action. The military advisor explained why military action was impossible. The council debated and argued and threatened, and nothing changed. The empire was dying, and its leaders could not accept it. There's another option, Keth Voren said. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. The council members looked at him with a mixture of anger and desperation. He was the admiral who had lost the greatest fleet in history. He was also the only one who had faced humanity directly and survived to tell about it. The humans offered peace, he continued. Real peace, between equals. They do not want to conquer us. They do not want to destroy us. They simply want to be left alone. Peace with humans is surrender, Vexaner spat. We would be admitting that they are stronger than us. They are stronger than us. Keth Voren said flatly. They proved that in 12 seconds. The question is not whether they are stronger. The question is whether we are wise enough to survive our own pride. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Council members shouted accusations and denials. Some called for Keth Voren's execution. Others demanded he be silent. The noise washed over him like water off stone. He had seen too much to be moved by political theater. When the shouting finally died down, he spoke again. I have spent 6 months thinking about what happened at Earth. I have studied the recordings. I have spoken with survivors from every surviving ship. And I have come to understand something that the council does not want to hear. He looked around the chamber, meeting each council member's eyes in turn. The humans did not just defeat us. They chose to defeat us in a specific way. They could have killed us all. They chose to let us live. They could have demanded our surrender. They chose to offer peace instead. They could have attacked our worlds in retaliation. They chose to stay in their own system and wait. He paused. Every choice they made was designed to teach us something. They are not monsters. They are not conquerors. They are simply a species that refuses to be conquered. And they want us to understand why conquest itself is the mistake. Pretty words from a defeated admiral, Vexaner sneered. What would you have us do? Bow to these humans? Beg for their forgiveness? I would have you recognize reality, Keth Voren said. The hegemony built its empire on military supremacy. That supremacy is gone. We can spend the next 100 years sending fleets to Earth and watching them die. Or we could accept that the age of conquest is over and find a new way forward. He turned to the chamber's main display and activated a star map. 43 species have declared independence in the past 6 months. 27 more are in active rebellion. Our fleets refuse to engage human forces, and without that threat, we have no way to hold the empire together. The map lit up with red markers showing lost territories. The hegemony's domain, once spanning 12 stellar clusters, had shrunk by nearly a third. We have to paths, Keth Voren continued. We can fight to hold what remains. We can execute admirals and crush rebellions and spend everything we have on a war we cannot win. In a generation, perhaps 2, there will be nothing left of the hegemony except ruins and memories. He changed the display to show a different image. A simple document, the same peace offer the humans had given him 6 months ago. Or we can accept the human offer. We can become what we should have been from the beginning. Not conquerors, but partners. Not masters, but neighbors. We can build something new on the ashes of the old. Something that does not require conquest to survive. The chamber was silent. Finally, a young council member spoke. She was new to her position, elevated after her predecessor's removal. Her voice was uncertain but determined. If we accept peace, what happens to the species we have conquered? Do they all leave? Some will, Keth Voren admitted. Many already have. But others might choose to stay, if we give them reason to. If we treat them as equals instead of subjects. If we prove that the hegemony can change. Can we change? She asked. After 10,000 years of conquest, can we become something else? Keth Voren thought about Captain Chen and her sad smile. He thought about the medical teams that had treated his wounds. The human soldiers who had offered water to thirsty prisoners. The mercy that had been shown when destruction would have been easier. The humans changed, he said. 50 years ago, they were a divided species, barely capable of leaving their own world. They looked at the hegemony and saw their extinction. They could have surrendered. They could have accepted that they would never be more than a minor species under our control. Instead, they chose to become something new. He looked at the young council member with something close to hope. If humans can transform themselves, perhaps we can too. The vote came 3 days later. It was close, closer than it should have been. But in the end, pragmatism won over pride. The hegemony of 12 suns accepted humanity's offer of peace. 1 year after the battle, Admiral Keth Voren traveled to Earth as part of the first official diplomatic delegation. He stood on the same observation deck where he had once planned humanity's conquest, now watching a world full of lights and life and the strange creatures who had changed the galaxy. Ambassador Chen Wei was waiting for him. She was older now, frail with age, but her eyes were still sharp. She smiled when she saw him. "Welcome to Earth, Admiral. I hear you were instrumental in getting the peace treaty approved." I simply told them the truth. Keth Voren said, "The truth you taught me, and what truth is that?" Keth Voren looked out at the blue and green world below. Somewhere down there, children were playing who would never know the fear of hegemony conquest. Somewhere down there, humans were living their lives, going to work, falling in love, dreaming of the future. They had won the right to exist on their own terms, and they had done it without becoming monsters. That true strength is not the ability to destroy, he said quietly. It is the ability to choose not to. Chen Wei nodded slowly. Humanity learned that lesson the hard way, she said. Through centuries of wars and atrocities and suffering. We hoped, perhaps foolishly, that other species might learn it without paying the same price. Some of us are learning, Keth Voren said. Slowly, perhaps, but we are learning. They stood together in silence, watching the Earth turn beneath them. Two species that had almost destroyed each other, finding a way to build something better instead. The galaxy would never be the same. But perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed.